Ukrainians forced to flee their homes as Kyiv says Russians deliberately destroyed a major dam, unleashing a wall of water on settlements downstream.
While it remains unclear if Ukraine's counter-offensive has begun, Kyiv says its forces are shifting to offensive actions in some areas.
Around 500,000 people are expected to take to the streets across France on Tuesday against the government's controversial pension reform.
In Kherson, it's all eyes on the river as people brace for flooding after the destruction of a major dam up the Dnieper River. The dam was holding back 18 million cubic meters of water in the Novokakhovka reservoir. Now Ukrainians downstream are having to flee their homes.
Через 5 годин вода дістане критичного рівня. Розпочалася евакуація мешканців небезпечних районів. Всі служби працюють. ДСНС, поліція, військові – всі поруч. Прошу зібрати документи і речі першої необхідності і чекати автобусів евакуації.
The floodwaters are expected to submerge the front lines of the war as well as homes, and there are concerns upstream as water from the reservoir is usually used to cool reactors at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The dam is in Russian hands, and the Ukrainians accuse them of deliberately filling the reservoir to the brim before destroying it. EU and European ministers have condemned its destruction as a war crime. Ukraine says it was a desperate and deliberate act of Russian sabotage aimed at thwarting its counter-offensive. Russia claims the damage was caused by Ukrainian bombardments. The attack on the Kakhovka Dam has provoked a wave of international condemnation, with most in the West blaming Russia. Chancellor Olaf Scholz described it as a new dimension to the war.
Zunächst mal ist das wichtig, dass man klar Stellung bezieht in dieser Frage. Und das ist ja auch etwas, das sich einreiht in viele der Verbrechen, die wir in der Ukraine gesehen haben, die von russischen Soldaten ausgegangen sind. Und in einer Art, der gehört zu einer Kriegsführung, die immer auch zivile Ziele, Städte, Dörfer, Krankenhäuser, Schulen, Infrastrukturen angegriffen hat.
NATO's chief Jens Stoltenberg also spoke out against the blast in a meeting with NATO allies.
The destruction of the Kakhovka Dam today puts thousands of civilians at risk and causes severe environmental damage. This is an outrageous act which demonstrates once again the brutality of Russia's war in Ukraine.
In a tweet, EU Council President Charles Michel said the destruction of the dam clearly qualifies as a war crime, adding that Russia will be held accountable. In contrast, the Kremlin blames Ukraine, saying the dam was shelled in an act of sabotage.
Однозначно, что эта диверсия ставила в качестве одной из целей лишить Крым воды. Падает уровень воды в водохранилище и, соответственно, сокращается подача в канал. Резко сокращается.
Ukraine has released this footage purporting to show attacks on Russian positions near Bakhmut. Kyiv earlier maintained silence on its military activities, but has since announced that its forces are shifting to offensive actions in some areas. Whether this amounts to the launch of its long-awaited counter-offensive remains unclear. But President Volodymyr Zelensky did reference Bakhmut in his nightly address.
Я вдячний кожному нашому воїну, усім нашим захисникам, нашим захисницям, які дали за цей день саме ті новини, які ми очікуємо. Бахмутський напрямок. Молодці воїни.
The Ukrainian leader earlier welcomed Britain's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly to Kyiv. The pair discussed Ukraine's accession to NATO, with Cleverly saying Ukraine will win the war and can count on London's support. Moscow, meanwhile, has released its own footage claiming to show it repelling an attempted large-scale offensive by Ukrainian forces in the Donetsk region. It says it killed 250 Ukrainian troops and destroyed tanks and other military vehicles. Russian state television has also aired footage showing the destruction in border towns in southwest Russia's Belgorod region. Some observers see the attacks as part of Ukraine's efforts to distract Moscow and stretch its forces to help the counteroffensive succeed. Over the skies of Ukraine and Russia, drones of all kinds have become the arm of choice in the defense against conventional weapons. They've graduated from being marginal tools used in reconnaissance missions to becoming a priority in warfare.
Ni Ucrania ni Rusia estaban realmente preparadas en lo que a drones se refiere para esta guerra. Rusia estaba atrasada en sus drones.
The war has been globalized by a push from the arms industry, which is developing new types of drones that are better adapted to strategies on the ground.
The skies above Ukraine, you don't just have Ukraine and Russia fighting. Indirectly, you have Turkey and Iran fighting. And these Turkish drones, as far as the Ukrainian push goes, these Turkish drones have been responsible for some of Ukraine's most deadly retaliatory strikes, from attacking oil depots within Russia to even the sinking of the Russian warship in the Black Sea. Australia, America, and the United Kingdom, they're actually working right now on AI-based drone swarms.
The immediate future for drones lies in the expansion of models, contract manufacturers in different countries, and even in the construction of new factories.
Los proveedores de drones para Rusia en este momento están siendo Israel, Irán, y no puedo asegurar todavía si están usando sistemas chinos.
I think the big question, though, is if Iran starts to build factories within Russia, and if Russia is able to build its own supply chain domestically that can pump out a high number of drones.
The European Court of Human Rights has condemned Moscow for not adequately investigating the poisoning of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in 2020. It ruled that Russia did not carry out a relevant judicial investigation to clarify Navalny's allegations that he was poisoned with a nerve agent for political reasons. A protest for the release of Navalny ended last Sunday with 100 detainees, while cities around the world joined in a wave of solidarity to demand the release of all political prisoners in Russia.
Up to 600,000 people are expected to take to the streets across France on Tuesday as part of nationwide protests against the country's controversial pension reform, which will push back the minimum retirement age from 62 to 64, a change that is unacceptable for trade unions and demonstrators who briefly occupied the headquarters of the organizing committee of the Paris 2024 Olympic Games.
Cette réforme, elle est malheureusement promulguée et les décrets de 64 ans sont publiés. C'est une réalité. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'on l'accepte. Ben non, mais ça ne veut pas dire qu'on l'accepte, mais la façon de ne pas l'accepter, elle va bouger. Ça ne fera pas les mêmes formes de mobilisation qu'on a eues jusqu'alors.
Supporters of the reform say it is needed to finance the country's pension system as the population ages. There are around 250 marches, rallies, and other actions planned across the country. In some places, such as Toulouse, demonstrations turned violent as protesters and police officers clashed.
The EU's annual Green Week has kicked off showcasing its climate projects and policies. Although the first meetings began on Saturday, the European Commission launched 2 days of debates and conferences in Brussels on Tuesday, the aim of which to achieve a climate-neutral world. The political leaders present stressed the need to change mentalities and, above all, to involve citizens.
We haven't done enough. We as the leaders, we need to go deeper on regions and our cities and to talk with our citizens. Why? Because sometimes we are talking so technical, so many technicalities. People don't pay attention to technicalities. If you do not express your word, your language, according with their level of understanding and having a connection with their concrete aspects of their lives.
The corporate world was also present at the conference, defending the balance they seek between profit and climate commitments.
Moi, j'aime pas trop faire reposer la responsabilité sur les épaules des consommateurs. J'aime bien qu'on prenne notre pleine responsabilité. Nous, notre rôle, c'est de les aider à avoir une consommation plus responsable, parce que je pense que tout le monde a envie d'avoir une consommation responsable. Mais la société n'est pas encore adaptée pour ça.
The question in the EU is no longer why commit to climate neutrality, rather how and at what pace to achieve it.
Apple presents Vision Pro, its mixed reality glasses. They cost $3,500 and will be available early next year in the United States. With this device, Apple aspires to revolutionize the sector and stand up to rival technological giants such as Google, Microsoft or Meta. Its device is controlled by the eyes and hands.
You can see, hear, and interact with digital content.
It's definitely not cheap. I mean, $3,500 is something that I think early adopters will definitely be able to afford, but then we go back to what is this device going to be for you? If you start to think about it as it's going to be your television, it's going to be your monitor, it's going to be your computer, this is a standalone device.
The announcement comes just 4 days after Meta unveiled its new mixed reality headset, the Meta Quest 3. So what makes the Apple device different?
We believe Apple Vision Pro is a revolutionary product.
Delivering profits on the device may rely on how much users are prepared to pay.